Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast, presented by Queen Anne Beer Hall. RJ, we got a fun podcast for this one because the final domino for the Kraken's offseason finally fell with Vince Dunn signing an extension prior to the arbitration hearing that would have been today. As you and I, talked about, we thought was going to happen. So we'll be getting to the Vince Dunn contract and that whole situation for the deep dive segment in just a little bit. News and notes. We got to talk about the other news from the Kraken involving Dave Hakstol. But very first off here, RJ, had a big family reunion this past weekend. A lot of family from all over the country coming into town. Got to see everybody. And I found out I've got family, and then there's a whole other group of just a ton of Kraken fans in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So I want to give a shout out to Michael and all the Kraken fans out there in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I love this about the Kraken, RJ. There's so many hockey fans around the country that didn't really have NHL teams, and then Kraken enter the league, and they just decided to, start following the NHL with the Kraken, and it's incredible. I mean, we know this because of the community we run, Discord, on Twitter, all that kind of stuff, the post-game lives. There are just Kraken fans all over the world, and it's so cool.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we've been lucky enough to learn by doing this is just how far and wide all this Kraken fans go. It's been awesome to interact with people, and especially I'm remembering the post games, from this season and last, where people coming in all, different hours of the day and night from wherever they live. It's great to see that. Hope you enjoyed the family reunion. I heard that maybe there were some gloating Vegas Golden Knights fans there. Sorry you had to deal with that.
Yeah, the Vegas contingent of the family was there, and yes, they were riding high. Although, you know what? Some of them did express some, upset feelings about how Vegas, turns over their roster so much, and it makes it a little hard to find individual players to root for and stuff. So I was happy they at least acknowledged that. I took that. That's something.
Okay. Something we don't have to deal with here in Seattle, at least not yet. So that's good.
Definitely. All right. So on the news and notes, RJ, why don't you kick us off with the Dave Hakstol news?
Right. So the Kraken recently announced that Dave Hakstol got a 2-year contract extension through the 25-26 season. So we found out, actually, with that extension being announced, that he only had 1 year left on his contract. So the initial contract that Hakstol signed with the Kraken, the terms of that were not made public. Nobody really knew that publicly. We weren't sure what the term was. We weren't sure what the money was. Still don't know what the money was. But now we know there was 1 year left on it. But Ron Francis and the Kraken chose not to wait and let him coach out that last season on that contract, extended him right now during the summer. We suspected this might happen when they got Francis done earlier in the summer, but 2-year extension. So Hakstol is under contract for the next 3 seasons with the Kraken. And so we did get to talk to him a little bit after that. He's still around. He's here in Seattle for the summer. We went out to KCI and had a little media availability with him. And it was kind of more fun, lighthearted type of thing. And he did confirm all the coaching staff is coming back for next year. So, good news on the continuity front there. Maybe we had some worries that Jay Leach might be poached, but we know that will not be the case. And of course, gave credit to his coaching staff, credit to his players. And, we're excited to see, for training camp, they're going to be geared up. And I think he said that they're going to try and reach another level. He said anybody that watched training camp last year, the first season to last season, noticed a big jump in the energy and the competitiveness and in all of that. And I certainly did. He said, if you notice that this year, it's going to be another jump coming. So hopefully we'll see that in September. But one thing that's interesting with the Hakstol extension that I want to talk about is the turnover with some of these NHL coaches. And when he got the extension, of course, I went to research and look at the list of current NHL coaches. And I noticed right off the bat, he's the second longest tenured coach in the division already. Dave Hakstol, who's been coaching this team for 2 seasons, is already the second longest tenured coach in the Pacific Division, behind only Todd McLellan. And, if McLellan doesn't win a playoff series soon, I don't know, maybe Hakstol will jump to the front of that list at some point. but it just kind of highlights the coaching turnover in the NHL. And then another interesting thing that was brought up to me at the Hakstol presser by Glenn Dreyfus from the Hockey News, good friend of ECH, and always enjoy chatting with him. And he said, feel free to use this on the podcast. And of course, I jumped at that opportunity because this is some great research that he did. So he looked at every expansion first head coach for a team, for all expansion teams post, the 1967 expansion where the league literally doubled in size. And so he looked at all those coaches to look at the tenure and how long that they lasted. And Dave Hakstol, already 11th on that list of expansion coaches. You look at the early ones too, they didn't really last very long. You've got, the Buffalo Sabres, Vancouver Canucks in the 1970s, Islanders, and then Atlanta, not lasting for very long. But Hakstol's already 11th on that list. But the incredible thing too, is if he just coaches out through the end of this next season, which we all expect him to do, he will jump up to 6th on that list and be the 6th longest tenured expansion coach of all time. And if he coaches through the end of the contract, it'll be up to the 4th longest serving expansion team coach in history. So I think that's pretty cool. It'll be interesting to watch Dave Hakstol climb up that list. He's got a lot of names that he can pass this season, even especially you look at Gerard Gallant at 213 games. So if Hakstol closes out this season, he'll pass Gerard Gallant from Vegas as a longer tenured coach than he was. So kind of a cool list to look at. Maybe we can post this somewhere, but Glenn prepared that for us. So anyway, thank you, Glenn. That's really cool to look at. And congrats to Dave Hakstol. Keep climbing that list.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I know when you texted me the morning of the press conference and you were just like, Hakstol's already like the 2nd longest tenured coach in the division, I was like, what? Really? That shouldn't be. And then I thought about it and I was like, oh yeah, he is. Like it's kind of crazy. I mean, I don't know, RJ, like NHL coaches, I think they might have a shorter lifespan than running backs in the NFL right now. It's insane how fast they're all turned over in their jobs. We were talking only 4, I think, guys have coached 5 years with one team that are still active right now. Like it's kind of crazy, but hopefully Dave Hakstol stays around for a long time. He's done a fantastic job with the Kraken. I'm just most thankful, RJ, that we're not going to enter, training camp preseason, first couple games of the year with everybody, asking when is Hakstol going to be fired, like we had to deal with last year, because, coming off the first year where everything was rough, nothing went kind of as everybody wanted it to. There was a lot of talk about that sort of thing, but I think he really answered a lot of the critics last year with what he was able to do with the Kraken, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what he's got in store for year 3, especially with this roster, because as we're going to talk about here moving forward into the Vince Dunn thing, it's a really, really good team that the Kraken have put together here, RJ. Still focusing on strengths, still focusing on the depth that they have. But I think Dave Hakstol's and the rest of the coaching staff, the continuity that you mentioned, I think it should do them well.
Yeah, and I think too, Hakstol's coaching style has more staying power than maybe some guys who are, kind of on the old school drill sergeant type of thing. We've talked about this in the past, but I do think if a coach is going to last and has that style to last, I don't see why it's not Dave Hakstol. And another thing, I was just talking about Glenn, but another question that he had in the Hakstol press that I thought was really good. He brought up Jared McCann's appearance on the podcast recently, and great podcast. Go check that out. But what I'm trying to remember, is it Luke Gadzik? It's former NHL player. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I think it was.
Okay. And on his podcast, and McCann kind of casually mentioned, so, I went in and I talked to the coach, and Gadzik stopped him. He's like, wait, you just go and talk to the coaches? Like you just go talk to them? You kind of couldn't believe it. And, maybe that's something that's, not as common as you might think. But that really helps out, I think, give your message staying power, and kind of have that relationship really not break down over time. So, hopefully that's a good sign.
Right. And, it doesn't surprise me to hear that kind of stuff either. You know what I mean? And obviously you're around it a lot more being up there, but anytime I'm up there or I even see the team traveling on the road, you do very much get the sense that, Hakstol would be the kind of guy whose door is always open to his players, and he's just going to be like frank and honest with them and communicate with them. We've talked a lot about that with this organization from the top all the way down. Communication is key in every ask every facet of life and every relationship you have, and the Kraken seem to really take that to heart. And I think Dave Hakstol really takes that to heart. So I'm really happy about that. To hear it, I wasn't surprised to hear it, which was nice. But I do think that it's a big deal, and I think that everything that he's done has really helped get the Kraken to where they are. The other thing, just to mention it again, right? The practice schedule. The fact that he doesn't wear guys out with practice. He makes sure, gives them time to rest and heal. It's an 82 game season. It's brutal. It's rough. Guys are getting beat up all the time. And Hakstol seemed to, really know what he was doing this past season with the practice schedule and the Kraken's ability to kind of avoid major injuries or even lingering injuries that kept guys at less than 100% for a long period of time. So I just think the whole organization, and that includes Dave Hakstol, of course, just do a really, really good job with how they handle everything. And I'm looking forward to having that continue.
Yep, I am too. But wasn't the only extension that got done this week. Got Dunn. I will not, no more Dunn puns. We've seen way too many of those. But Vince Dunn signs a 4-year extension at 7.35 million AAV. And Dylan, we were both expecting a Vince Dunn extension before arbitration. We did not think the case would actually go to arbitration. Very few do. So we knew it was coming, and it was interesting how it developed throughout the day too, because you had Kevin Weeks getting his account back. Glad Weeksy was able to get his account back from those MacBook hackers. And then gets his account back, says, okay, Vince Dunn extension is coming. This is early in the day. So of course, you and I, how we operate, right? We're locked in. We're like looking, okay, when are the numbers coming out? Let's get ready to tweet. Let's get ready to analyze this thing, right? And then hours pass. And then Vince Dunn with a cryptic type of tweet, with some emojis, including the hourglass and some squid emojis and the heart. I know there was some speculation on our Discord. Oh, 7 emojis. Does that mean 7 years? Does that mean 7 million? What does it mean? And then a little bit later, the official terms of the deal come out with the Kraken announcing it officially. So we were expecting this deal to happen, but I don't think either of us were expecting this 4-year term.
No.
So Dylan, what do you think of the term? The contract ends up looking a little bit differently than we both thought. I know you thought in the 8.5 to 9 million range for AAV on a long-term deal. How is this different than what you expected? And is that a good thing for the Kraken?
It's very different. Real quick, just to shout out the Discord while all that was going on. I was trying to guess 7 years maybe with the 7 emojis. There was somebody I saw who kind of called it, who was guessing based on the amount of squids or whatever that it meant 4-year term with 7 million being the number. There was somebody who did it, but I wasn't able to get a name because the Discord was flying by once the contract actually got signed. So apologies for not being able to shout you out directly. Leave a comment on YouTube, hit us up on Twitter or on Discord. You know who you are, but somebody did call it in the Discord, and I wanted to have that known. It's kind of crazy, right? Like, the very first thing my mind went to, RJ, was the Jared McCann extension from a couple years ago that he signed with the Kraken, where you're just like, that's the number? That's the term? I think this one, for me, the term was a little bit more surprising than the number. But it's kind of wild, because it's what? It's a bridge deal for someone who's 26? Like, that doesn't make any sense. This doesn't happen. Like, we haven't seen any other deal really like this, RJ, for a player in Vince Dunn's situation where you're 1 year away from unrestricted free agency at a position that, the market has only been going up at a very steep incline, if I might add. And it's a very in-demand position. It's a position in which if you did hit unrestricted free agency, you were going to have a lot of interest. You're going to be able to probably get something done. I was very, very intrigued by it. I have a lot of questions about it, RJ. I mean, the first thing is, do you think I'm wrong for even thinking that had he just, settled on or went to arbitration, did a 1 year, then gone to unrestricted free agency? Obviously, it would depend on how he played in that year in between. But do you think that, looking at, say, John Klingberg last year and kind of the situation, do you think teams, as we're seeing a lot of these defensive contracts go up and up, they've all been re-signed with their current team? We haven't really seen that big UFA deal in a little while. Do you think there's something to that? And do you think Vince Dunn maybe was looking at that, or his team was looking at that, and then they kind of decided to, just re-up here and stick with the shorter term?
I think it's possible. I mean, you do look at example like maybe a Dougie Hamilton, but if you think if you're Vince Dunn, maybe you're a little bit of a tier below that, certainly in what you've proven already.
Hmm.
And I think maybe you're willing to kind of settle for that type of deal. You certainly don't want to fall into a Klingberg type situation
Yeah.
where your market value just basically seems to evaporate overnight. Still, I've got to think Vince Dunn, maybe has a little bit more leverage than this, and this is a bit of Ron Francis kind of working his magic, because we know what the D market is. We were both talking about, I was saying 7.5 to 8 on a long-term deal. You were saying 8 to 8.5 even on a long-term deal, and you can find consistent comparables for that. And I think this deal is just kind of unique. You look at other contract comparables. I mean, Cap Friendly has a great tool where you can compare contracts. And I immediately went and looked at this Vince Dunn contract. All right, what are the most comparable contracts? And there aren't really that are that great of a match. You look at the top match, and it's Neil Pionk in 2021. Of course, he was only 25 signing that, and that deal was at a 5.8 cap hit. It was a 4-year deal, but even that contract is a 69% match. Like, that's not very much. So this deal kind of stands out from any others that we can look and compare it to. The second most comparable deal, of course, was Mikhail Sergachev, and that's the one that you pointed to as
Right.
the one to maybe look at. That was an 8-year deal at $8.5 million as a cap hit. So that's kind of more what you were looking at. I think it shows that you were a little bit on the money, except that maybe you didn't take into account Ron Francis working his magic.
I guess not, because just like with the Jared McCann thing, right? I feel like, the number is a little bit lower than I was expecting. Obviously, the term is extremely team friendly, right? And
Yes.
look, it could be player friendly, right? You're talking about him coming out and being an unrestricted free agent again at, around 30, 31 years old. That's certainly not too old to then score another big contract, especially at the position that he's playing. So I can understand Vince Dunn wanting to sign something like that, understanding that if he had pushed it and maybe made it a 5 or 6 year deal, then that option isn't going to exist on the back end in the same way, right? Like this is him maybe kind of hedging the his bets there. The other interesting thing though was when I was looking at the term and I was trying to think of why he did it. This is something that I thought about, and I want to ask you. Do you think Vince Dunn and or his team, like whoever's advising him and talking all this through with him, do you think that they view the Kraken's window as the next 4 years? And then this puts him in a situation where after that 4 years, they'll still have Matty, they'll still have Shane Wright, Chalet, all that kind of stuff. But that might be when the Kraken would need to be retooling around those guys. And then this gives Vince Dunn the option to either be a part of that retool or to then leave and maybe find then a different competitive situation. But do you think that that might have something to do with it? Because as I look at the roster, I could certainly make an argument for the next 4 years is, starting this year is really that kind of prime competitive window for the Kraken.
I could see that. You look at the next 4 years, and especially with guys like Matty playing the last year of his ELC coming up, Shane Wright continuing to be on his ELC. Those are the years where you can take advantage of some of those best contracts, and of course you have prospects coming up that'll fill those roles for cheaper than what current guys are doing. I think it makes sense, and if 4 years time, I think that could be the real reevaluation point for both team and player at that point if you want to choose to do that. And yes, I at the start, I think, maybe a minute after the deal was announced, I kind of had to give some rapid reaction on Twitter. And my first thought was, well, this is a solid deal for both sides. And looking at the Dunn side of it, you do get to go back to unrestricted free agency at age 30. And hopefully after 4 really good seasons with the Kraken, this is certainly a bet on yourself type of deal,
Right.
while giving you some security. I mean, there's still plenty of money in this
Yes.
deal that even if for some reason you never play again, you should be okay in your life, with that amount of money. But it sets you up at age 30 to go get another big contract. And hopefully the salary cap is at, $100 million or more by that time. You would hope. It's the NHL, so you never want to count on it.
Yes.
But, the idea that maybe if you were to take an 8-year deal at a 7-figure or something like that, that maybe you are passing up on more money. If you play well over the next 4 years, you could get even higher than that, even for just your 30 to 34 season, and maybe even get a 5 or 6 year deal if you play really well, that's going to pay you even more because it's a lesser percentage of the cap. So I think it works for Dunn's side there. I mean, I just can't get over how good this term is for the Kraken, though. It makes so much sense for them. I mean, you really protect yourself against any eventuality, because if Dunn is that kind of low end first pair, high end second pair tweener, if he does regress, if this season was one of those kind of contract year type aberrations and he goes back to maybe what he was the season before, then it's a slight overpay. But what you really do is you mitigate the massive risk on the back end of it, like an 8-year deal, if it turns out that this isn't what he is. And you set yourself up just fine. You can move on in 4 years and it's good. But if he is who he showed he was last season, of course, that's what you're hoping for.
Yep.
It is an absolute steal in this D market. You look at those contract comparables and you get that right through, as you mentioned, the meat of your competitive window, where you have this great defenseman on a steal of a contract. And it's the kind of thing that can set you up to build around that. And yeah, maybe it's tough in 4 years when he's 30 and he's this great defenseman and you're looking at a very, very expensive contract to re-sign him. But at that point, so much more than you know now. You know exactly what Vince Dunn is. You're going to know what Riker Evans is. You're going to know what Ty Nelson is.
Yep, exactly.
You're going to know more about what like a Lukas Dragicevic is. Can he bring something that can maybe replace what Vince Dunn does? It's just the perfect reevaluation point for the Kraken. I mean, Ron Francis getting this 4-year term, I mean, that is the huge accomplishment of this deal.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you look at it even beyond the term, just looking at the dollar amount, the cap hit, right? 735. It makes that puts Vince Dunn at the 25th cap hit, highest cap hit amongst defensemen, which I think is totally appropriate. Right?
Like, yeah, I mean, you look at the names around it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was something that was really surprising to me because, look, I'm sure he entered negotiations wanting closer to 9 just because that's the way everything has trended. He should have been asking for it. We talked about that, right? Like, you got to if you're going to do it. But I think where they settled was really appropriate value for what he's brought to the table so far, what you're betting on him bringing in the future, right? What kind of player you think he can be over the next 4 years. And that's just something that you don't see very often in the NHL, where it's just like, oh, the number seems like just on the money and kind of perfect. It doesn't feel like an overpay. It doesn't feel like the player got slighted, especially because he gets that shorter term where he's going to have the chance to play himself into another big contract on the back end of it. And I just want to take a moment to appreciate one of these nice kind of win-win scenarios. When you are talking about high leverage contracts, you're talking about a lot of money. You're talking about a situation in which two parties have to be looking after their own interests. For both of them to just kind of have some common sense and come to a very fair deal all the way around for everybody, it doesn't happen very often, but I love to see it, and so I just want to shout that out.
No, well said there, Dylan. I know Ron Francis going into the process said that he joked that a deal where nobody's really happy, that's how you know it's a fair deal. But hopefully both sides are looking at this, where both sides are happy. I mean, I don't know if that's even possible, but it seems like they kind of did, meet in the middle, and there's something for everyone in this deal.
Yeah, but yes, looking at the other players he's kind of around now, cap hit wise, some of the names that he's above right now, some former teammates in Torrey Krug and Colton Paryenko, Ivan Provorov, Cam Fowler. Granted, some of these contracts are a little bit older. Hampus Lindholm, that's a more recent deal there. So he's making a little bit more than those guys, which again, if he's going to play like he did last season, he should, right? He brought a lot more value than those guys are bringing. But then you look at some of the names kind of above him, Morgan Riley, Aaron Ekblad, Jared Spurgeon, right? Quinn Hughes. And you start going like, yeah, he played like some of those guys. I'd argue maybe better than Morgan Riley. And if Aaron Ekblad was ever able to stay healthy, he should be making a lot more. But you start looking at some of those other names and you're like, that's kind of more in line with the season that he just had. If he's able to continue that and make that something he's able to do consistently, then yeah, he belongs in that conversation with them. So I really like this deal as far as the comps just from an AAV standpoint.
Yep. And I should mention too, it is the highest that Ron Francis has gone on a contract. We knew this was
Yep.
coming with this deal, but I thought it was really interesting. And I had the tweet ready to go just in drafts for maybe a month, knowing that this contract would be the biggest signed by both AAV and percentage of the cap. It's 8.8% of the salary cap, which is a better indicator, by the way. You can kind of judge
Mm-hmm.
contracts based on the percentage of cap from past years, so it makes it easier to compare. And of course, Grubauer now at number 2 at 5.9 million. When they signed him a couple of years ago in free agency, that was 7.24% of the cap at that time. Of course, the cap hasn't really changed that much. I was ready to say that it was also the largest contract signed by total dollars, because I really thought it would be given the term I predicted.
Yeah.
But no, it actually isn't. So I believe it's still the Jacob Slavin deal that Francis signed back when he was in Carolina.
Yeah. So there's a couple other things that interest me here that I want to talk about, RJ. This puts in line with just about, everybody else as far as the longest term left on a contract for the Seattle Kraken. Nobody is signed out further past the 2026-2027 year. Got to think Matty Beniers, whenever he signs an extension, will be. But do you think that was also something Francis was keeping in the back of his mind, was, hey, that's when McCann's contract's up, it's now when Dunn's contract's up, it's when Grubauer's contract's up, and it's when Berkey's contract's up?
Yeah, interesting. I understand if you don't want to kind of go past a certain term where you basically want to reevaluate at a certain point, especially with guys who are not your own draft picks. I know it's an expansion team, so you're not going to have any of your own draft picks really sign that long until Matty does. But I get it with kind of more veteran players. You want to set that limit as far as term if you can. I mean, sometimes you just don't have the leverage to do it, but if you can do it, it's really great, especially when you talk about guys going into their 30s and maybe not having that term too long, Grubauer being the exception, but goalies can age differently sometimes. We've seen that.
Yep.
But yeah, I do think that's really solid. Obviously, some younger players you want to lock up long term. I think we'll see that with Matty Beniers. I expect him to blow right past that 2027 term thing, and those are the contracts that make the most sense when you're signing your own draft picks, your own guys, and signing them to term, hopefully before they hit their total ceiling, so the contract looks like a bit of a steal. I saw the Athletics top contracts, Domino put that out today, and it was just full of contracts where like the Jack Hughes deal, where the Devils for their franchise center, but when it wasn't quite clear he was going to be a franchise center, you get that done at a good amount. Or even like a Matthew Tkachuk, where he's a really good player, but you don't know he's this game breaker completely. That's one where you trade for him, but still you get that contract locked up, and even then 9.5 looks great. Those are the kind of deals you want to do. But maybe a free agent signing like Burakovsky or a Vince Dunn, where you're not entirely sure. It might be helpful to kind of set that term limit there.
It also kind of plays into that idea that I was floating earlier about, that could be when that first competitive cup contention window maybe is closing, and it gives the Kraken the ability to have a hard reset. Obviously, some of the contracts that they're going to sign with other guys, either re-upping them or free agents in the next off season or two, will probably push past that mark. But I do think that it's interesting that this Vince Dunn extension kind of didn't push it out any further than Kraken already had guys signed to. And I thought that was just, again, something I wasn't expecting. Do you think, I know we're on the same page. We would love the lock up Matty before he kind of explodes and shows you really who he can be in the NHL and everything. Lock up your young players, as Elliot Friedman always says. Do you think there's something, though, that we could maybe tank from this Vince Dunn deal that would tell us, maybe give us a hint that maybe Matty does a bridge deal? Like, do you think that's how the Kraken are trying to roll with everything? Is just, look, we just want short term on everybody, and we can just then kind of figure things out as situations develop? Do you think Matty Beniers and his camp might look at this and go, well, cap is going up in not too long from now. We can kind of wait and see how things go. You look at some of the other situations around the league, right, where you have guys like Austin Matthews and some other players, right, where they kind of sign deals that would take them right up to, that 26, 27 age mark right there to UFA. Do you think that there's a chance that Matty Beniers would do something like that? Or do you think the team would want to do something like that?
A bridge deal, possibly. Certainly not walking him right to UFA like Austin Matthews and
It's
the Leafs. I
ridiculous.
mean, that's one where the player just has, all the leverage and wants to use it and intends to use it. I don't see Matty doing a deal like that.
I don't
Just,
either.
I think he's going to be a little more team friendly than that, even if he might have, I don't know if he has as much leverage as Matthews did. I don't think he does, but still, I don't see him doing that. But a bridge deal I could see is possible. And look, if you believe your window really is the next 4 years and you're going to go for it right now, a bridge deal might be most beneficial to you because you will save on that cap hit and you can build the most pieces around what you have right now. You can really go in next offseason and try and maybe bring in a big marquee free agent. We know some big names are hitting the market. You can go and try and target a trade for a real difference maker potentially. And so I think a bridge deal could make sense. I still think it would be a mistake. I still think with a player like Matty Beniers, who you know is going to be a star for you, you want to lock that in as long a term as possible and extend that window that you have with them out as far as you can, because the price is only going to go up. And you pretty much know that, especially with the cap going up as much as we project. The price is only going to go up. I would try and sign him 8 years for basically whatever it takes. But I can understand the argument that maybe a bridge deal would make sense. But you better be contending for a cup in the next 4 years because you're going to be paying on the back half of it. You never want to have to do a bridge deal.
Right, exactly. It's just, I never would have thought we would have seen 4-year term for Vince Dunn either. So that's why I felt like I got to bring it up. Have to.
I had to look at real quick. Ron Francis, the longest contracts that he's given out too, because he hasn't gone with a lot of term very often. 1 7 year, and that was the, huh?
Well, that was be the Slavin deal, right?
Yep, that's the Slavin deal. Only 3 6-year deals, and it was Grubauer, which I know is kind of uncharacteristic for him, and then 2 with the Canes. Brett Pesce, that long extension, and then I'm sorry, I had to bring this up for this reason. The other 6-year deal. Do you know who it was with the Canes?
Sebastian Aho.
No. Much better.
Oh, I don't know who.
Victor Rask.
Oh, my boy.
Yes. A 6-year deal, $24 million for Victor Rask. So those it's a very select group of players that he will go long term for. So anyway, just had to bring that one up because I saw Victor Rask's name come up to the top of the list.
When is he coming back, RJ? When are the Kraken bringing him back? I want him with the Firebirds. Let's go. That'd be great.
Oh, that would
cover
be really
every
fun.
game. Be there every game.
That's how we get you out there to more games.
Yep.
Victor Rask there. You'd move out to Coachella Valley.
Yeah, I would. I would try to find a way.
Okay. See if you could like live with him, just share an apartment with him or share a house with him or something. We could get some great content out of that.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And you know what? I could really use
one up Tenny's talks.
Yep, learn from his hair care routine too. That would be nice. That would be my real goal behind the scenes would be for that. All right, so now that this deal is kind of been signed, RJ, it was the last thing we were really waiting on for the Kraken's off season. It feels like, I doubt we should really expect anything beyond a Matty extension anytime soon from the Kraken, just until training camp. And with the Matty extension, who knows if we're going to see it. But there's a couple things that I want to talk about. One, this leaves them with just under $1 million in cap space, RJ, entering the season. But I mean, they've got 23 roster spots. Like they're fine, right? Like I felt like this was kind of perfect. They kind of did what you talk about, right, RJ? Right, where you just kind of like you signed a bunch of deals and then you gave the last guy left whatever was left in the cap space. I don't know that Ron Francis directly did that, but that's certainly what it looks like from the outside. But I like where the Kraken are at cap hit wise. They have a little bit of flexibility should they need it. They'll have more come like the deadline. The other thing I want to talk about though is this gives them 13 forwards if you count Burakovsky coming back from IR. Gives them 8 defensemen and 3 goalies. I'm guessing we're not going to stick with that like roster configuration going into the season. So because we brought up what our lines were, our fantasy lines last week, our kind of dream lineups for the Kraken and everything, there were some people who talked about the fact that, look, we both had them with only 7 defensemen as the setup. And some people did question that. Some people questioning the idea of that means, look, you're going to have to waive Cale Fleury. Are you worried about losing him on waivers, something like that? So I did want to bring that up, RJ. Do you think there's a chance the Kraken go with 8 defensemen? And I know we're on the same page about Fleury being the odd man out. Do you think somebody would, pick up Cale Fleury on waivers if when the Kraken had to make the move?
Yeah, it's a good question, and thanks, everyone, for leaving the comments too, because it is something worth talking about. I still don't think there's a very high chance that they keep 8 defensemen, given the setup that they have. I think the Kraken tend to respond to whatever they have the strength of, player wise. And you saw they did keep extra defensemen around in the past, like last season, because they had more defensemen. It just kind of made sense to do that. I think they will pivot given the amount of forwards that they have, given that you've got names like Cole Lind and John Hayden too at forward, that you might be worried. I'd be certainly more worried about sending them down through waivers and having them be claimed than I would be about a Cale Fleury. So I do think Cale Fleury will ultimately end up hitting waivers. I don't know that he gets claimed. We talked about it when we brought up his extension that he signed, because it is, isn't it a 2-year deal?
It is a 2-year deal, $800,000 per.
Right. And that you're committing that much money, because I believe it is a one-way deal also.
Yes, it is.
I'm double checking this. Yeah, because it's a one-way contract. I think that was designed to kind of waiver proof him, and to be able to send him down, because you knew that you're probably going to have to do that. Mm-hmm. So no, I don't think another team will bite at that, just given the term and the guaranteed money going to him. And I think that's by design.
Yes, you did bring that up when we talked about the Cale Fleury re-signing. Also, he's going to have arbitration rights at the end, but that, I don't know. If you're worried about that, it's because you're worried you're gonna claim him off waivers and he's gonna play really, really well for you. In which case, I don't think that's a worry at all. But I agree with you, and I think that a lot of times, especially for us over here with the Kraken, we've had to put a lot of guys on waivers that we've been really, really worried and scared about, and then those fears have never kind of materialized. I'm trying to think of the players really that we've lost on waivers, RJ, and is it Barry Boulay?
Austin Czarnik.
Czarnik. Hellberg? Did we lose? That was waivers?
Yeah,
too?
Hellberg.
All
Hellberg. Right. That's probably the one that hit everyone the hardest.
That one was the one that hit everybody the hardest. But even still, right? We're not talking about a big list of Kraken legends here.
Hellberg is still a Kraken legend. I'm sorry.
Hellberg is an NHL legend at this point,
for them,
though.
But he actually never played a game for them. Still a Kraken legend, though. I will maintain.
Barbalay at least played a game, the first game. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's scary, and the possibility does exist, right? I mean, we got Tolvanen off waivers. We know what it can be. But I'm not too worried about it either. I think it's just like with the Vince Dunn arbitration thing. The amount of times you actually lose the player, it's a lot smaller than you think it is.
Yeah, and I think again the Tolvanen thing, it's unusual. I mean, there's a reason
that doesn't happen
because it's so unusual. Yeah, and so it might make it seem like it's more common than it is. But really, that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, no, and it probably shouldn't have happened. There's no reason for all of that to have worked its way out the way that it did. So there it is. I mean, feel free to tell me if I'm wrong, RJ. If you think Kraken still have moves you think they might be making or going to make, but it sure seems like they're gonna enter training camp, and the things that are going to be decided for the roster is going to be who's going to be the backup to Grubauer. Is it going to be Joey or is it going to be Drieger? I guess which defenseman, maybe, Cale Fleury plays out of his mind and we have a different decision to make at D. And then, is Shane Wright going to be ready? Is he going to be another name thrown into that forward mix? How's Cole Lind going to look? How's John Hayden going to look? And what is Hakstol going to want to do there? But really, in my mind, that's the stuff to start looking forward to as far as this roster goes.
Yeah, and the other thing too, and you touched on it a little bit, but what does the fourth line look like, and what's their job?
Yeah,
and that's going to be a big question, and it's something that we're going to ask about very early on in training camp, and kind of try and get Hakstol's idea of what he sees that fourth line being, because there is so much turnover there. I see you laughing. What's
I was gonna say, why didn't you ask that at his press conference? His
nobody was asking. Nobody was asking about stuff like that. It was all, hey, happy summer, congrats on the contract. Are you going to Taylor Swift tomorrow?
I know it was all that, but that's why you got to start it off with, now that you've secured the bag again, what role do you envision for your fourth line this year?
Oh man, you gotta set the
tone
and
make sure
early.
It's the last question after everybody has asked the Taylor Swift questions. You just do one last one. It'll be quick, be really quick. Hardly have to think about it, and then you just nail them with that. and see what he does, because he could just laugh it off and walk away, and then you just made a really funny joke to the coach. See, it's a win-win.
They're perfect. Yeah.
But
I know he would not laugh it off and walk away. He's the type that would try and give me a good answer.
I know.
So that's why it wouldn't work.
I know it wouldn't work at all. But it is a very good point, and I do think that is going to be something, right? Because you could easily envision a situation in which it is a Shane Wright with a Ty Cartier and a Brandon Tanev, and this becomes like a push possession, drive possession, get pucks out of the defensive zone and into the offensive zone, and then just throw all your bodies around, and Shane Wright will be parked in front of the net waiting for something that he can, work with. Or I could see something being a little bit more defensively focused, right? Where you have Bellemare centering, maybe a Tanev, but he's playing a little bit differently. We've talked about, you could put Yamamoto down there or something. It's going to be very, very intriguing. Oh, what about that, RJ? What about a Cole Lind, Yamamoto on the wings? And then I guess it would have to be Shane Wright at that point. You're going to have Bellemare center those guys as like a scoring fourth line? That doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, I don't really see the fit there. That would work better with Shane Wright centering it, but that would be a fun fourth line.
You move Jared McCann back to center and you stick him on the fourth line with those guys.
Forward depth.
It's the perfect plan. Everybody gets 12 minutes a night. That's it.
Everybody 12 to 13 minutes a night, up and down the lineup at forward, and then you have Dunn and Larson playing 24.
Yes, exactly.
On D.
And goalies get 45. Ooh. Well, make sure everybody's fresh. All right.
That's a plan.
Yes, I was going to say, and as everybody I'm sure is guessing, we're starting to run out of things here. Here's the problem, RJ. We were waiting for this Vince Dunn contract, and then it came out, and it was just perfect all the way around, and now there wasn't too much to talk about with it.
I know. I really thought there might be some controversy there, or kind of having to dance around the fact that this is a little bit much. The night before the contract was announced, I think I texted this to you. I had a dream that the contract details were announced, that I overslept and missed it. They announced it at 6 a.m. or something, that I missed it, because that's the kind of dream that I have.
Yes.
And they announced it was an 8-year deal, and I think it was 9.57.
Yes.
And I had to try and figure out how I was going to be this is a really bad deal for the Kraken. That is too high of a number. So I was going to try and figure out how to explain that and how to talk about it. And so that was my stress dream that I ended up waking up from. And then real life was so much better. So
yes,
I don't know.
Hey, you at least, you nailed the date and time. You know what I mean?
I did, yeah.
You did do that. But yes, no, Vince Dunn did not become the third highest paid defenseman in the NHL behind Erik Karlsson and Drew Doughty.
The part of my dream was tweeting about that. Guys, he's the third highest paid defenseman in the league. Do we believe that this should be the case?
Yes, and this is why everybody, when RJ just texts me, so I had this dream last night, I don't even read the rest of the message.
He's learned by now.
I just know RJ's stressing about something, and I don't. That's it. Oh man. No, look, it was a fantastic deal. It's a fantastic deal for both sides, like I brought up earlier. And look, I want Vince Dunn to play out of his mind these next 4 years, and I want him to be the guy who leads this blue line into deep playoff runs and hopefully eventually some sort of Stanley Cup berth. I think that's going to be fantastic, and we know he has the skills. It's just going to be a matter of can he repeat what he did last year? And look, there's nothing that says he can't, other than maybe most other historical player performances.
You had to leave
it at that. I couldn't do it. No, but look, hey, just like his contract, he's going to break the mold. He's going to do it. He'll be the guy.
Yep. He worked so hard over the last offseason, did everything right. If he keeps up, he's just got to keep working out with Tanev over the offseason.
Work out with
That
Tanev.
was the key.
He's going to have Adam Larson there by his side. We know that. And Larson's going to, play every game and all that stuff that he does. And look, I really do think that there is something to when Vince Dunn came into the Kraken and was able to have that the ice time he was able to get here be put into a top pairing role. he kind of had to figure out what kind of player he was going to be that first season, right? And we saw him, there was the bad pinch ups and all that kind of stuff that he kind of struggled with, but then he started to get really, really solid defensively. And I do think that he kind of shifted his focus to let me just get solid defensively. Let me work with Adam Larson, learn what I can from him. He's talked about this, right? We kind of know that's what the situation was. And then I feel like last year was the time where it was, okay, how can I contribute offensively without having to make questionable pinch ups, without having to put my defensive partner in a tough bind? How can I do this smartly? And we saw him really work and develop on that. Because remember, he started off the season pretty rough, right? Like really rough, actually. And then he was able to progressively get better. So I do think Vince Dunn is the kind of guy where he can focus in on something each season, just like all the great players do. We've talked about this in the past. And he can really fine tune that and work on it and get better. And so there is no reason why he can't continue to put up big offensive numbers, why he can't play above average defense the way that he has been. I just hope that this year, the thing he decides to focus on is the power play.
Yeah, I was just about to finish that off with it. If he figures out the power play, look out, because that could bring a whole nother level to his game. And I'll bring up this tweet that I saw from Big Head Hockey earlier this week. Every defenseman in the last decade that has more 5-on-5 points in a season than Vince Dunn did this year. And it's a list of Erik Karlsson, Roman Josi, Cale Makar, Morgan Riley, and Brent Burns. Just shows the 5-on-5 production that Vince Dunn had last season was elite. Can he keep that going, and can he maybe find some upside on the power play? Like, those are the questions to ask.
Yeah, and again, to be clear, it's maybe not Vince Dunn's fault on the power play either. Nobody can find production on the power play, so there's that.
As we may have mentioned at some point in the past.
Yeah, once or twice. All right, so I think that's going to do it. RJ, you got to get traveling. I'm dealing with another throat infection, so there's no reason to stretch this out any longer than it has to. The bottom line, though, is Vince Dunn is here. The contract is over. Everybody can stop stressing. RJ doesn't need to have any more crazy dreams. He's locked up. He's going to be here for the next 4 years. The Kraken have an incredible roster. They're all done for the most part, except for what we're going to see come training camp time. I'm just excited for it. I was going to say let's just skip up to that, but maybe that's just because my tonsil surgery is right before training camp, and I'm just wishing to get to that too.
That's good reason to want to skip up to that. But no, I know exactly what you mean. I was watching just some random Kraken game highlights the other day because I missed it so much. I missed watching the games. I missed having new Kraken hockey to watch. So still a fair amount of summer ahead of us. Still some fun things we're going to cover, by the way. We're not going away.
Yes.
The real summer has basically started. We're going to have to be a lot more creative as far as finding topics, but we will be, just like we were last year. Stick with us. We will stay here every week doing this deep dive podcast. We will find some Kraken related things to talk about and some real fun stuff too in August as we get into, the silly season, way too early kind of stuff. We'll have some ideas for you, but definitely a lot of fun stuff coming.
That's really why I'm most excited about all this, because it does feel like, okay, we're closing the book on like the news and reporting aspect of the offseason. Now it just gets into the fun, rampant speculation nonsense stuff of the offseason, which is, everybody, if you were around last year, knows that's my favorite time. I like when nothing's happening in August and I just get to pose whatever ridiculous question I want to RJ and watch his face as I'm describing it.
You did the face perfectly. Everyone go watch the video version at the very end here. You got my face. Yep. Absolutely got it.
So there's that. And yeah, I was just going to say, RJ, you're missing it. Do you ever just walk over to CPA and you just like press your face and your hands on the glass and you just stand there for like 20 minutes?
Who told you?
I have my sources.
When I was there the other day for Bite of Seattle, I couldn't help but stop by and just press my face to the CPA glass and look inside.
Yep. All right, everybody. Hope everybody's having a great summer so far and continues to have one. We'll be back next week with the deep dive, and we'll see what the Kraken have in store for us and what we have in store for all of you. Should be a lot of fun. Another shout out to Queen Anne Beer Hall. Thanks so much for sponsoring the podcast as always, and we'll see y'all next time. Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons: Absurdly Sane, Alex, Andrew, Anonymous, Ben, Brad, Burnt Creme, Kaylin, Chris, Cody, Connor, Coop, Daryl, Denise, DJ Singletone, Duthin, Eli, Elizabeth, Evan, Habak, Gaby, Gary, Gregory, Jay, Jane, Jeremy, Jessica, Joni, Joseph, Josh, Joshua, Katie, Keegan, Kepler, Kitty B. Kraken,
Leanne, Light, Lonnie, Mark, Maya,
Michael,
Michelle, Noah,
Nori,
Nunya, Paige, Paul,
Rayanne,
Rebecca,
Ryan,
Sarah, Scott, C.A. Kraken, Sean B., Sean O., Sergey,
Shannon,
Shoeshine, Skeletal Tendency, Steve, Steven, Striatic, Hasty Kobold, Team YMIAT, Tank Commander Ty, Wendy, Strife, and Zane.
thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.